On today's Remington's Inside the Industry, I'm sitting down with one of the shooting and hunting industry's most respected outdoors women, Diana Rupp. From her role as editor-in-chief of Sports Afield magazine, author and far-traveled big game hunter, Diana has her finger on the pulse of this industry, as you're about to learn. This podcast is brought to you by Remington Firearms. For more information on the new era of Remington, visit our site at remarms.com. So, tell me a little bit, just give me a little background about yourself. I mean, I know a lot about it because, of course, Folsom has written everything, but also you and I have met once. I don't recall, don't know if you recall that, but we did
Dallas
meet.
Safari Club, yes.
Dallas Safari Club,
recall,
exactly.
Yes.
I know Scott a little bit, so I know a little bit about you, but maybe you could give me a kind of a quick rundown of how a girl from Pennsylvania ever got to the position that you're doing and is now a world-renowned writer, editor, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, thank you. You certainly make it sound wonderful, and it has been a fantastic ride. I was born and raised in Pennsylvania. My parents were both very avid hunters. My dad got my mom into it, and then he got me into it, and we hunted as a family and pursued white-tailed deer and grouse and squirrels and everything. And I grew up thinking that was totally normal. Wasn't until I left for college that I kind of realized that, yeah, apparently not all girls do this.
Or guys, for that matter.
Or guys, exactly. But I always had a tremendous passion for it. In Pennsylvania, you had to be 12 years old to start hunting, and I just could not wait until I was 12 and I could get out there and get my first deer. So I always had the passion for it. And I also always had a passion for writing. I was writing little stories on tablet paper when I was a little kid. So it all kind of came together. I kind of always knew that this is what I wanted to do. I wanted to be in the outdoor magazine business or somewhere in the outdoor field that involved writing. So I got a journalism degree in college. And then I was very fortunate right out of college to land a job with, believe it or not, Sports Afield when it was still owned by Hearst Publications in New York City. And so you can imagine this is a huge culture shock for a girl from rural Pennsylvania to go to Manhattan and work in downtown Manhattan. But it was great. I spent 2 years there. I started out as an editorial assistant, which is basically an administrative position, lowest person on the totem pole. But I learned so much. There were just absolutely wonderful, skilled editors there at the time who took me under their wing and really helped me out and helped me learn the business. And I got promoted to associate editor eventually, and did that, and so got a little bit of experience. And from there, I knew I didn't want to stay in New York City because that was not the lifestyle I was looking for.
And that's not a place for somebody that loves the outdoors and hunting.
Right. So eventually I moved back to Pennsylvania. I started freelancing. I ended up in some other editorial jobs. I met my husband. We got married. He's in the same business as I am. He's an editor. And we ended up out in California, much to the horror of our families, who could not understand why we would want to move to California. But we got job offers, kind of a offer you couldn't refuse. He was offered the job as editor of Peterson's Hunting, and I was offered the job of editing these regional outdoor magazines that this company had. So we had to go, and it was a great opportunity. And so we got more experience there. And in the meantime, Sports Afield actually had undergone its own challenges and changes, and it had ended up being sold twice. And it was purchased by a company in Southern California called Field Sports Publishing. And the owner actually owned Safari Press, which is a outdoor book publishing company. He had never owned a magazine before, but he called me one day out of the blue and said, "I just bought Sports Afield, and I'm looking for an editor-in-chief. Would you like to come and interview?" And I was basically like, "I'll get in the car right now."
when was that? What year was that?
That was 2002.
Okay.
So I had been working in the industry about 10 years at that point. And
You're never supposed to tell that, Diana. You know,
I'm
because,
dating myself.
yeah, because people can add. Well, when it's to their benefit, they can add really well.
True, true. That's all right. Anyway, so yeah, I interviewed with them. They ended up hiring me, and it was certainly a leap of faith on their part, and I give them major credit because, hiring a female as an outdoor magazine editor at the time was not the norm. But I think they saw that I had, tremendous passion for hunting and for the subject matter, and I had the necessary experience, and so apparently it worked out for them because I'm still here.
I'm not going to say 20 years later, but yeah, it's 20
I
years later.
almost said it.
Yeah, no, well, look, we already crossed that bridge, so why not?
Exactly,
Hey,
exactly.
look, there's a couple of things that have kind of popped out there that's interesting because I think a lot of people maybe don't think of them. Excuse me. A lot of people have not been in the Northeast, but coming from Pennsylvania, and I'm sure it's not one little bit different than upstate New York or some of these other, Ohio. When deer season comes around, it's a freaking big deal. I mean, people
Huge.
wait so long for it, and opening day, everybody gets together. I mean, it's a big deal. It really is.
It's a huge deal, and especially where I grew up in the north central part of Pennsylvania. It was it's very wooded. There are more deer than people, so it was a huge deal, and people poured in from all over the state. We had the first day of buck season and the first day of doe season we had off school. They were school holidays. My dad, who was actually a high school teacher, once told me they didn't do that because they figured the students wouldn't show up. He said they did it because they knew the teachers wouldn't show up. So I always thought was pretty interesting.
Well, when I took over a company in 2002, I guess it was Crosman Corporation, the airgun company, and so which is in East Bloomfield, New York, so upstate New York. And when I took over, I think it was August, August, and to my surprise, half of our staff was gone on opening day.
I'm
Uh,
not surprised.
yeah, but that was the last time they were gone on opening day. I don't mind. Look, business is business, and you have to conduct your business accordingly. And if people want to be gone on opening day, that's fine. But plan it. The company needs to plan it. The people need to plan it. But you never see that in other states. When I say other states, the Northeast is primarily the states or the part of the country that you'll see that passion for opening day. And I don't know whether it's just the love of deer hunting or whether I think it's a combination of hunting and everybody, groups of people getting together, having breakfast, all going their separate ways, getting back at the end of the day, and talking their stories, or whether it's just really the passion for hunting. I think it's a combination.
I think so too. And you bring up a really good point because especially where I grew up, there was a big camp culture, deer camp culture there. So, people would had owned their deer camps and they looked forward to that all year, and that's when they took their vacation from work, and they would come up with their buddies or their families or whoever, and they would spend their week in deer camp, and that was what they did. And it's just exactly what you said, that with the camaraderie, I think, and the traditions of it were as important as the hunting part, but it,
Yeah,
it all went together.
one of the things that, and I know that Dave's sitting next to me, and others have heard me say this. One of the things I think that has has changed, or I don't know if it hasn't changed. Maybe we don't talk about it as much, but the camaraderie or the family spending time in the woods is one of the great things about the outdoors, whether it be hunting or fishing. But it's one of the great things about the outdoors, and but it also seems to be one of the things that people spend less time talking about. I've told this story a number of times, but Tim Fallon, which is a really good friend of mine, Larry Weisshuhn, another good friend. We went on a hunt in Kyrgyzstan one time. Was the freaking worst hunt you could ever imagine. From the second we landed, that the outfitter thought we were coming the day later. So at 2 a.m. in Bishkek, here's three guys with all their guns and a cameraman standing there with our thumbs up our asses, and not having a clue, can't get a hold of the agent, and finally got a hold of the agent, and he said, "So, what do you mean, so?" And that was the highlight. It got a lot worse after that.
Oh no.
We ate the same the same goat for I think 5 or 6 days, at least 2 meals a day, and got food poisoning. You name it, was terrible. Everything about it was terrible. But I was sitting in the hotel afterwards a few days later and thinking, that wasn't so bad after all. But it was because there was some good friends there, and we shared something that most people never will. And, it's kind of it's a cool thing. And I think we as, largely anyway, we as hunters or outdoors people have stopped talking about that, even though we may still really appreciate it.
I think you're right, and I think we should talk about that aspect more. One thing I've seen change over the years is, like those deer camps back in Pennsylvania, they used to be, all guys, a bunch of buddies would come up and maybe they'd bring their sons. But in more recent years, and I was fortunate to grow up, my family, everybody in my family enjoyed hunting. So it was a family thing. And I'm seeing more of that. I'm seeing more families in the field when I go on a guided hunt or go to a lodge. I'm seeing a lot more, the wives come along. They may or may not be hunting, but they're along. They're enjoying the experience. They're enjoying the outdoors. Everybody's bringing their sons and daughters. So I am seeing a lot more of the family aspect of it, which I'm really, really happy about. But you're right. We're not talking about that as much. And I think that would, we hunters need to work on our image a little bit. And I think that would be one good way to do it.
I agree. I think maybe we do need to work on our image a little bit. One of the things that I've always had not really a beef against, but I really don't like the connotation that it has, and that is trophy hunting. I absolutely hate the sound of it. Yes, if you get a nice big bull elk, you just might keep the horns. You might. I don't know whether you do or not, but to the non-hunters, if you suggest that you're trophy hunting, their immediate reaction is, yeah, there's somebody that kills an animal, chops its head off, and they're done. So I think that we, as hunters, I think we need to change our image in multiple ways.
I completely agree, and this is one of the things that I've been trying to work on in recent years. So you're right about the wording. It's so important. Words matter. They matter in every part of life, but certainly with hunting. And trophy hunting has a terrible rap. That we all know that that's not what happens when you kill an elk. That the first thing you bring out is the meat because it's right. The most valuable meat and it's wonderful. And yes, we're going to hang the rack on the wall. Brings us great memories. But we've eaten all the meat as well. Might tan the hide. I mean, we use as much of that animal as possible. And that story isn't getting out there. But I think we as hunters we're pretty bad at telling our story. And we have a wonderful story to tell. And we really need to do a better job of getting that out there.
It's actually interesting that you said that. That I think we do have a wonderful story to tell that we haven't done as good a job telling. I'll give you a little story that happened to me not that long ago. I've been spending a reasonable amount of time recently in Turkey. I've been there, I think, 3 or 4 times in the last 6 months. And I met a really wonderful young lady there that was an engineer, a master's degree in mechanical engineering. She worked for one of the firearms companies. She's not a hunter. but she's an outdoor enthusiast, loves birds, etc., etc. So even though she was working for one of the firearms companies, she really didn't understand a lot about it, and she was a little, I'm not going to say turned off, but really the thought of her thought process of somebody that would kill an animal was really not great. And I explained to her a little bit. I said, I explained to her about the conservation through hunting and everything about it. And to her credit, she did her homework a little bit, and she came back. She said, "I get it." She said, "I had no idea how important hunting really was." And now she says, "You know what? I think I'm going to become a hunter." I think that's pretty cool, actually.
That's fantastic. But but it's also fascinating because even though she had a little bit of experience with, guns in the industry, she still had no idea that hunting does what it does, that it has that conservation aspect. And I think it's kind of our own fault. We need to get that story out there. And I think, we would bring more hunters in if we did that. But we would also just have a lot more acceptance in the general population if we could do that.
Yeah, I think most of the time the general population is quite willing to listen. There's always that group of people that are never going to listen. It doesn't matter what happens as far as they're concerned. Hunters are evil people that shouldn't be on the face of the earth. And no matter what happens, you're never going to talk them into anything. But I think there's a huge part of the population that's easy to talk to, will listen, like this young lady. She listened. She's smart, and she said, "I'm going to find out myself." And all of a sudden, bingo. So I think it's pretty cool. One of the things that you mentioned, which I think is really interesting and will interest people, is coming into the firearms industry 32 years ago. Sorry about that. I can
okay.
add to 32 years ago as a female was not an easy thing.
Oddly, it was easier than you would think. I found this industry right from the get-go to be very accepting. People, I mean, they may have been skeptical initially, but as soon as they talk to you and realize that you shared the passion for hunting, that I may not have been certainly not an expert in everything, or anything really at that point, but they could tell that I had the drive to learn and I wanted to do my best and contribute as much as possible. And I was so impressed with how much people really stepped up to help me out, to be mentors, and to really welcome me into the industry. It's one of the things I love about this industry. There were very few women in high profile positions at that time, a few in the PR departments, et cetera, a couple editors, and they all were just wonderful to me as well. And I've tried to reciprocate that as well. And now it's great. There's so many more women in the outdoor industry. But it's overall, it's a very accepting industry.
Really?
Yeah.
I didn't
At least
realize that.
that's been my experience in any case. Yes. Yes.
No, look, I think that's really good. I would, I personally have not seen that. But then I guess, well, I only hire males. Maybe that's why. No, that's not true. My chief financial officer is a female. My chief human resources officer is a female. I'm happy to work with women anytime.
They're in all the important positions, apparently.
Yeah, exactly. And whoever controls the purse strings and the human resources controls the entire company. So exactly. I probably work for them. Just don't realize it. No, it's good to hear that, because I first of all, I wasn't really aware of that, and I think the other thing is that people have an opinion, and they might hear something a little bit different from. I'm not a female, so I can never say what it's like. Only a female can say that. So it's good to hear that, and I think most of the hunters I know, there's again, just like people that will buy into hunting, There's most people will listen, some won't. I think that that's the same with everything. There's the vast majority of people that we deal with are great. There's always some assholes, and there always will be, and there's nothing you can do. And excuse my language, but that's
It's true.
part of our conversation.
Absolutely. No, there's no doubt. And of course, I've run into those people as well. Every now and then you're in a hunting camp somewhere, and there's a guy making snarky comments or whatever. But I ignore it. Just
Well,
don't engage.
until you come back with a much better harvest, a much better animal than he did.
Although sometimes that makes it worse.
I suppose. I actually find it kind of amusing because I spent a lot of time. Tim Fallon, mentioned earlier, and I are good friends, and I go there quite often when I just need a couple of day break. And Tim's very accommodating. Look, come on up, relax, shoot some targets. There's an awful lot of women there taking the classes now. There was Tim started at FTW a new hunters program about a year ago that's just had tremendous success.
Yeah, we ran a story about that. Great program.
Oh, yeah.
Great.
Now, did Tim tell you that I was the guy that convinced him he needed to do it?
No,
No,
I don't think
of
I knew
course
that.
he didn't. What a guy! Actually, I'm not. Shouldn't say I was the one that convinced him, but I was there one time, and we discussed it, and I said, Tim, you really need to do this because one of the things that is lacking is a place for people that are interested in hunting and don't know anybody that does it, and if you don't know anybody that hunts, where are you going to go? Are you going to buy a gun and wander around like a fool? It's just impossible to do. So I said, you really need to start this. And then we talked about it quite a bit, and he started. Anyway, one of the first programs, Remington was one of the sponsors. And my son and his wife, at the time his fiance, went. She had never shot a gun in her life. And this is what I was leading to. Often what happens is the guys are real macho. Yeah, I can shoot. Come on, I can shoot anything. The women, they go, teach me. I haven't shot. I don't know if I can shoot, but I'm going to listen to everything you tell me, and I'm going to learn. And often they are great, great shots.
Exactly. I've heard that over and over. Way back when my dad used to be the coach of the high school rifle team, and he said that very same thing about the girls on the team. He said, they always listened, took instruction, et cetera. The guys all thought they already knew how to do it, and it's so true today. These classes are just fantastic. What Tim's doing there at FTW, and there are others that are cropping up. And there are field to table events.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of, because there's a big, like you said, there's a big learning curve trying to learn to hunt. If you don't know anybody, if you've never done it, it's very difficult to get into it. But if you can take a class, if you can take one of these, it gives you a starting point, and you get some of the basic skills.
It's really, really important.
It is.
Because there's so much to it. There's, it's not just shooting something. There's so much more to it. But one of the challenges, if you don't know somebody, is I can't imagine somebody without a program like that. I have difficulty understanding how somebody would become a hunter. I mentioned earlier when we were just chatting before we started that I spent, I guess, I was going to say most of my career, but I guess it's kind of 50-50 now. In the ski industry, I was the president of Head Ski Company and Bollé Eyewear, of a number of other companies. And we did a big study one time, not our company at the time, but the industry, about why people that were just or wanted to start skiing, why they chose to go to a mass merchant versus a specialty store, and why they stopped skiing. Maybe they went once and they quit again. And it was because they were made to feel very, very uncomfortable. They were made to feel like they were stupid because they didn't know how to do it, because they weren't good at it, because they didn't know what skis to buy, blah blah blah. I don't think that it's the same in hunting, but it's really a challenge to go and buy a gun and start hunting without any help. And and the other thing too that I say all the time is that I and I know these guys are, maybe I'm promoting my racing career. I don't know, but I race cars, and I see a lot of people. People ask me all the time because I coach. I run various programs. People say, "Well, how come? How can you drive so well?" Well, I drive well because I learned how to drive. I see people that are buying really much better cars, and they can drive much faster, but they can't drive worth a damn. And I see people, shooters, the same. They buy a better gun. I think I'll go buy a custom gun for $5,000, $8,000, $10,000. And why don't you just buy that $1,000 gun or use the one that you've got and spend a few $1,000s learning how to shoot it properly?
Exactly. It's not the tool, it's the user. And yeah, most of the people would benefit from spending a lot more time with just a 22, and just plinking
Exactly.
and really getting their skills up to snuff. And but you're right, and it's also difficult because, it's time, like everything else. You took the time and invested it to build your skills in driving, I'm sure, and practiced and all that stuff. And people need to do the same with hunting. It's a time commitment for sure, to do it well.
Well, it is absolutely, it's a time commitment, and but I also think that it's something. If I wound an animal, Diana, I get so pissed off about it that it's unbelievable.
It's devastating. I
It really
agree.
is. It just bothers me so much because it's just unnecessary. But it happens. It happens to all of us. It always will happen. I'm sure I have not had a bad. This is. I haven't. All my bad shots are not behind me. I know that. Um,
Unfortunately, yeah, with everyone.
Unfortunately, because there's so many things. One time I was in Africa, and I never found a blood trail, so I don't think that I wounded it. But I had a great shot, and I just couldn't figure it out. We spent so much time looking for a blood trail, couldn't find it, and finally, what we saw is a broken branch, just a small, tiny little branch.
Wow.
And we say, that must have deflected it enough to miss the shot. But it just really annoys me. And I think a lot of people, I'd like to see hunters, have a little bit more concern about that wounding. And maybe then they'd spend a little bit more time learning. But nonetheless, I think programs like Tim's are fantastic. I think it's great for the industry. I think the other thing that's happening too is the field to table is becoming a big deal, especially with the younger generation. But you must have seen. I mean, tell me the changes that have happened in the media, or in publications in the since you took your first job.
Boy,
I
it's
mean, it must
absolutely
be
astounding.
tremendously different.
It really is. So that first job I had at Hearst Magazines, Sports Afield had an entire floor. The staff had an entire floor at 250 West 55th Street, one of their big buildings. There were probably 25 people working there. We had, ad staff, we had big art department, bunch of editors, support staff, etc. And I'd say the biggest change is that, these days it's basically, we had most magazines have an editor, an art director, and maybe one or two ad salespeople. And the staffs have shrunk tremendously. And part of that is the technology has allowed it. It's a lot easier to put a magazine together with, InDesign and Photoshop and all these tools that we have today. But it's also just the economics of it. Just print publications, have just become, I mean, let's face it, the internet has taken over our world. So fewer and fewer people are buying print publications. But the nice thing is that it's funny, things kind of tend to go in cycles. And so for a while there, people were like, why are you guys still a print publication? Obviously, we have a digital edition as well. But now more and more people are saying, I don't really like reading magazine on online. I would rather hold it in my hands. It's a tactile experience. They really enjoy that. So we're hearing more and more from people who still like the print edition, and that's very gratifying to me because we're going to hold on to this print edition as long as we possibly can.
I think people that really enjoy reading, I think, do like to hold books or magazines in their hand.
They do. They do. There's just something about it. And, certainly I read a lot on screens and probably too much on screens. But especially with the magazine, just because of the layout and the way we use the photos to amplify the text. It's a little different than, say, a newspaper or even a book, where it's pretty much just text and you can just read that online. But you can't get the same effect of a magazine article unless you can really just flip the page and look at the big photo of the buffalo or whatever it is.
Right.
And I think people really, that's an experience that people really like. But that has certainly, I mean, there are fewer and fewer magazines, and it's become more and more difficult for them to make it, for whatever reason. And I think fewer younger people maybe are used to picking up a magazine. But those who do, I find that our readers are extremely passionate about the magazine. So
What about from an advertising standpoint? Has your advertising changed? And I mean, obviously it has, but I would say the spend. And look, I have no idea if this is factual or not. I would suggest the spend on publications has declined considerably by manufacturers.
it has, and that's one of the reasons for the decline in print in general. Is just the advertising support has faded somewhat, and that's also in some ways coming around a little bit too, because most advertisers poured their money into digital, into the web, etc. But they're finding, I think, that it's it's not, you can track how many eyeballs say got on your ad online, which is a little harder to do in the magazine. But people are used to scrolling by that and just clicking away from it and so forth. So you have to put a lot more impressions out there. Whereas in a magazine like ours, you're getting a very focused, passionate audience, and they're going to see your ad and they're going to look at it and they're probably going to read it. They're going to probably criticize it or love it or whatever they do. And I hear from them all the time, hey, what about that ad? That was a cool ad. So people are, I think you just get a lot more focused audience in a print publication. I think that some advertisers are starting to realize that, that is actually an advantage on the print side.
Yeah, I'm not. Uh, it's tough for me to kind of figure it out because I know that I'm going to say maybe 10 years ago, maybe a little bit less, there was a big return to direct marketing. Like because one of the things that the digital era has done is those of us that are in the to want to sell our goods, we can pinpoint exactly who the person is, where they are, how many times, how many impressions they get. We can pinpoint so much, which we were never able to do before. Before we were able to say we're trying to market to people between the age of 18 and 45, blah, blah, blah. But, more than that we couldn't. Today we can say, I want to market to somebody that's 30 years old, that's in this income bracket, that lives in this area. So there was a lot of resurgence to direct mail advertising because they could send something that says, hey, Dave Fulson, I've got the perfect gun for you. Here it is. Here's how much it is. You should buy it. Because I was able to find out that Dave Fulson was a 30-year-old guy that made enough money and loved to hunt.
Right.
But I don't know if you utilize that type of information or or not in the publications.
We do to an extent, probably not as much as you would in a
No,
direct marketing
yeah, no,
campaign.
of
Yeah,
course not.
yeah.
But I guess my
But
point was, Diana, is that was there was a time that that used to be done. People used to direct market, and it kind of went away. People said, "Oh, that's a waste of time," and then it came back when the digital world got more involved. That was really what I was saying more than anything.
right, yeah, because and that is the big attraction of digital is that you can really zero in and focus on those people. um, and it's just simply a different type of advertising. And some people like it, some people don't. But we hear from our advertisers that they get a lot of response from our magazine, and I think a lot of it is we try to be a little bit aspirational as a magazine.
Hmm.
We have really nice guns and really cool hunts, and we try to not all of our readers have say gone to Africa or whatever, but so many of them get back to us and say, I hear people come up to me at the shows all the time and say, I never really thought about going to Africa, but I've been reading your magazine and I really want to make an African safari. Or they say, I never really thought about getting a custom gun, but boy, I've been reading Steve Hughes' column and all these custom guns, and boy, yeah, I think I might get one. So you sort of, I think, build a demand with what we try to do in the magazine.
What about editorial in the because I look being a manufacturer, I've always been a big fan of editorial. If I can get you or one of the writers to write a great story, I'm a pretty happy guy with that because my belief has always been right or wrong that people read that and really they believe it far more than they believe an advertisement from Remington.
Yeah, that's certainly true, and it's a fine line because readers are savvy. They know if you're really just shilling for someone. So the writer has to be very sincere, in that I did love this Remington rifle. I killed this great sheep with it or whatever I did, and because they will see through that if it's not sincere. But at the same time, you're right, readers want to know what you used. If I run a story and I didn't mention what rifle the writer used or whatever, I'll certainly get a letter or two saying, hey, what were they shooting,
Yeah.
I really want to know. So it's
Yeah.
important to them. Yeah.
Yeah, one of the things that I really don't like, and I had a conversation with somebody like about this recently, is that, look, I really don't want to see in writing or on on TV or radio. I lined up the elk with my my 700 Remington with my Swarovski scope, blah blah blah, to shoot my whatever ammunition is. And I go, oh really? Come on, it's
Yeah.
just,
No,
you
I
know,
totally agree that because that comes across as, yeah, you're just name dropping a bunch of brands, and you're not telling the story. We try to make a point to put that in a sort of box, a sidebar in at the
right.
end of the story, where it says, here's what we used, here was the gear for the hunt, and people, I think, really like it presented in that way. So that's what we try to do anyway.
Well, and Sports Afield has really stayed true to the big game. Um, you know, where a lot of companies have gone multiple different directions, but I think you've stayed really true to it, and I think to a large degree the big game in Africa as well. And how has that worked? I mean, I know it's worked really well, but why do you think that is? Has it been a real conscientious effort to do so?
It was, and is a conscientious effort. Actually, one of the things, when my company bought the magazine, we looked at the whole world of magazines, and at that point, the big three magazines, which were used to be Sports Field, Field and Stream, Outdoor Life, they were general interest outdoor magazines. So they would cover trout fishing and bass fishing and small game hunting and big game hunting and occasional Africa, whatever, but they would do it all. And we found that there are very few outdoor generalists anymore. Most people pick a niche and just that's what they do. They're bow hunters, they're big game hunters, they're bird hunters, whatever it is that their passion is, that's what they focus on. And so magazines have kind of followed that, because that way you pull in certainly a slightly smaller audience, but those people love what you're doing. They love that magazine. And that's the audience that we went after, was that kind of traveling big game hunting audience. Partly because that's what my boss, the owner of the magazine, knew best from doing Safari Press, which those books were very much focused on African travel and fine guns and that kind of thing. So he knew that aspect of the readership quite well, and that's really paid off, I think. But yes, we try to stay focused, and it's hard sometimes because you might get, say, a bow hunting company that wants to come in. Can you do a story on bow hunting? Well, we're really a rifle hunting magazine. That's really our focus. And so we have tried our best to stay true to that, and I think our readers really appreciate it.
Well, I think so too. I really believe that. I think that, you know, the old story, if it's not broken, don't fix it. And so many people, they do very well and they go, hey, I think I'll do this instead. And totally forgetting what made them successful in the first place.
Right, exactly. I think you gotta stick to your strengths, recognize your strengths, and let those pay off for you.
Um, you've had quite a hunting life yourself. Well, let me before I jump to there, let me go back a little bit. You said aspirational. My belief, I've got all kinds of stories and all kinds of things I believe are, you know, true, not true. Who knows? Um, one of them is that most of the gun companies originated in the Northeast. Remington Spring. I
Right.
mean, there's one after another after another. You said it yourself. How wooded it was, how much game there is. I've lived there. I've hunted there. A long shot is 80 yards. That's really quite a
Yeah.
long shot. 50 yards is more like it. A long walk is maybe 100 yards or a couple of 100 yards, from the road into the blind or so I think a number of things have happened. First of all, the guns have been always designed with that 100-yard thing. I mean, you can talk about it. Yeah, you can shoot it out to 200, 300, 500 yards. There's frankly a big difference between a gun that's designed for the Northeast and one that's designed for the mountain hunting, where
Yes.
your shots are 400 or 500 yards. Um, very, very different thing. So, kind of that's part of it. But aspirationally, I happen to believe, might be wrong, but aspirationally, I believe that most of the people in the states that hunt as they do in the Northeast, aspirationally, they want to go elk hunting or sheep hunting or Cape buffalo hunting or whatever it is. They may never do it, but they really want to, and they look at publications, they look at movies, whatever it is, and aspirationally they go, boy, wouldn't that be great?
Yes. They dream of it, and that's one reason I think that they pick up magazines like Sports Afield. That's they, you know, and eventually, hopefully, they actually do it. They make their dream come true.
I hope with a
Yeah,
Remington gun, I hope,
with
but
the Remington. Yes.
yeah. But if
Exactly.
not, I agree. I hope they do. But I think aspiration is a really big deal. I think that people have to have something, at least I believe, something that they're excited about, something they look forward to, something that they dream about, and hopefully they get to make it come true at some point in time.
Yes. I know I'm always thinking about my next hunt. It's like it's a old cliche, but they say what's your best hunt is the next one you're gonna do, and that's
And
I'm
where is
always
your next
planning
one?
it.
Where is
I
your
don't.
next one?
I actually don't have any big travels planned this year. I'm gonna stay fairly close to home, but there's a 20 something friend of mine that I've been mentoring. She killed her first deer last year. So I booked an antelope hunt for us in Wyoming for this coming fall. So I'm very excited about that because, I guess as I get older, I'm more excited to see other people shoot their animals as much as I have my own. So I'm really excited to take her on that hunt. And I think she'll do really well. Got some deer tags here in Colorado. And we've actually got a very interesting bird hunt planned. Friends of ours who live in the high mountains have horses, and they're going to take us up for ptarmigan up at
Oh,
like
wow.
12,000
Really?
feet. Yeah, on horseback. So that should be a really interesting.
I grew up in the Canadian Rockies, and ptarmigan are everywhere. I've never heard of anybody hunting a ptarmigan.
I've heard of them hunting in Alaska, but I had not really ever heard of it in the mountains of Colorado. So this should be a unique experience.
What do they do with them? Do they
Eat them.
really?
Yeah.
I had no idea. I mean, I remember. Look, I skied at a place, in Lake Louise. Ptarmigan was one of the runs.
Yep.
I thought, okay, yeah, I know what a ptarmigan is. I never thought of eating one before.
Apparently they're very good. I mean, I think
Really?
they're a grouse. So
Yeah.
and other types of grouse are really good. So
The other
yeah.
thing
So
that's really good to eat too is antelope. You've got
yes,
which
I love
they're
antelope.
really, really fantastic for eating.
A lot of people don't like them, and I think it's there's a combination. It's always how you take care of them, etc. Sometimes antelope are eating a lot of sage, so they're maybe
Yes.
not as tasty. But my experience with antelope has been really good. I really enjoy antelope meat. I
I,
enjoy pretty much all wild game meat though,
yeah.
so I have to
I do
say.
as well. I really enjoy antelope. It's one of my favorites. But I, I, I think I've been fortunate in that the, that there hasn't been much sage in the ones that I have.
Yeah. Yeah, it
Fortunately,
depends where you're hunting, and just what they're eating. So
yeah, exactly. Um, you've had a quite a career hunting. Kind of what's your? You said your next hunt is your favorite, but what has been your most exciting, most favorite hunt that you look back and say, "Boy, I'm so glad that I did that."
there have been many. I've been so very fortunate to have had the opportunity to do so many really neat hunts around the world. But the one that really comes to mind, which is probably one of the greatest adventures I've ever had, was Tajikistan ibex hunt that I did in 20 what was that 2018, 2019. It was right before the pandemic. In any case, it was a tremendous um, experience because it wasn't a typical outfitter hunt. It was booked. We booked it through ANCOT, which is this collection of community conservancies in Tajikistan, and the hunt was based out of this high mountain village, very hard scrabble place with wonderful people, and we stayed in their house. Cultural immersion. We stayed in their house, slept on their floor, and it was the village guys in the village and some women in the village who guided us up to our ibex, and they were ex poachers, and that's all they used to do. And then they got into this conservancy thing and started bringing in paying hunters, and it had such a huge effect on this village and on the other villages that were participating in this program, because they had, with the money that the hunters brought in, they had been able to put a little electrical generating system in, so they had electricity. They had improved their roads. They had sent some of their young people to school in the big city. It had changed their lifestyle just tremendously. So they loved having hunters.
But
And it,
those hunters are really bad people. They don't help anybody anywhere in the world,
yeah,
isn't?
yeah.
Yeah.
Again, a story we need to be telling. But it was a female friend of mine and I who went over. And one of the other really neat things about this is that the guys in the village were training two of the young women to be guides as well. And this is a big deal in a very traditional, Muslim
Muslim, yeah, yeah,
society. Yeah, yeah.
absolutely.
But they were so wonderful to these women, and they were just tough as nails. I mean, they were running up and down the mountains, bringing us bottles of water and spotting game, and just they were just amazing. And these people, all of the Tajiks were just, I mean, my friend and I just we coined the term. They're Tajik tough. I mean, you couldn't find tougher people anywhere. I don't think they ever hardly even drank water. They smoked these hand rolled cigarettes, and yet they could just kick our butts running
Uh,
up these mountains. So it
that
was
just always
amazing.
amazes me. I see that these people running up and down mountains, and sometimes even with a cigarette hanging out of their
Oh
mouth. I go,
yeah,
"What the hell?" Really?
exactly.
Like I just suck on one and I start coughing.
But this hunt, I mean, it was, we ended up killing our ibex at almost 16,000 feet in elevation. It was mentally and physically tough. But to just the whole experience of it with that whole community conservancy and learning about the culture of these people, and they became friends, and that was just, to me, that was the epitome of what an international hunt should be. We were doing good for the community, we were having a great adventure, we were learning about the lifestyle of the people. It was the whole experience
Yeah,
was just fantastic.
I get that. Not the same, of course, but every time, whenever I go to Africa, I just get such a great feeling because the people that live there, the people that you know that get to meet, that it's life changing for them. And every time I do, I think this is pretty cool. I mean, people think they have no idea that an elephant, which I haven't harvested, but I really don't care if I do or not. But people think it's so terrible that somebody killed an elephant. Yet in an hour in that village, there's nothing but a blood stain left because every single solitary little thing of that elephant is not just used; it's used passionately.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Eh,
it's so amazing too, because it's not just, I mean, it's this back and forth benefit for the community, gets that wonderful meat, but also they understand the value of that elephant, or that lion or whatever it might
right.
be, and they're not going to, poison it because it chomped on some of their crops. They're going to, make sure that, and they become conservationists themselves
Yeah,
through that whole thing. I think you had Mark Haldane on one of your
I
podcasts, and
did.
what he's doing is just, I mean, it's fantastic. And
Mark,
he's,
during the podcast. Sorry for interrupting,
yeah,
Diana,
no
but
worries.
during the podcast, and I had no idea about this, but Mark told me when he got that concession, there was I think under 1,000 Cape buffalo in a particular region, and today, 20 years later, there's 25,000.
Wow.
Now,
That's
really,
amazing.
talk about conservation.
Exactly.
It's unbelievable.
Exactly.
And interesting enough, if you're traveling to Africa, and I think a lot of these countries are not dissimilar, but traveling to Africa, the 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 local people absolutely love the hunters.
Yes.
They like everything about them. And if they had a choice to take the hunters versus the safari people, they'd take the hunters over and over and over again. I think for a number of reasons. I think because they're a lot more humble generally. They
Hmm.
want to get to know the region, the people, because that's part of hunting. You 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 get guided. You've got a tracker. You've got a PH. You know you eat with them, etc., etc. So they get to know them a lot more. And where the safari people come in with their cameras and they ride around and that's it.
Right.
You know.
Right. Yeah, and they really do appreciate the hunters. I was on a safari in Namibia, and I was hunting a kudu, and after I had successfully taken the kudu, the two of the trackers who had hung back were explaining to the PH, who explained it to me because we didn't all speak the same language, but they had done this little ceremony where they were giving tobacco to their ancestors' spirits and everything to
Yeah.
get us having a good hunt. And the reason they said they were so focused on this, they had heard I was going to write a story about them that would bring in more hunters to the area. And they said they really, really wanted me to be successful. So I would write the story and more hunters would come. I was so touched by that.
Yeah, no, it's a pretty cool life that we lead. You know,
It
I mean,
is.
it's got its ups and downs, but generally, it's a pretty cool life.
We're very, very fortunate. Yeah, I'm thankful every day that I got into this business.
Yeah, any hunts that you kind of your dream hunt that you really want to go on, haven't been able to yet?
Rocky Mountain bighorns.
Ah,
I'm trying to draw a tag. Um, I've been fortunate. I got a Dall sheep in the Yukon and a stone sheep in British Columbia a few years ago. And I'll probably never draw a desert. That's a very difficult tag to draw, but I'd really love to hunt a bighorn, especially now that I live in Colorado and I see them a lot up in the mountains. And that is just a dream hunt for me. Sheep hunting is, I mean, talk about aspirational. Most of us don't get to do it very often, but the challenge of it and just being up in those mountains is, to me, it's probably one of the ultimate hunts.
well, I grew up in Banff, so
So
and
you know sheep.
I know sheep very well, and they're really cool animals.
They are.
Unfortunately, my knees won't allow me to hunt them anymore. I can't, you know, I'll have to have some knee replacements, and until
Yeah.
that happens, can't go up and down like that. So I hope that you can.
I'm gonna do my best to try to make it happen. But yeah, sheep tags. I mean, they're in short supply and it's difficult to draw. So it's just one of those things you have to hang in there and hope, try to keep yourself in shape and hope it happens eventually. So
Well, I'm sure it will. Diana, I've got to move on. I think it was great talking to you. Let's plan on at some point in the not too distant future. I hope we'll have an opportunity to get together face to face.
I would love to. Be great to hunt with you sometime or do a little trigger time and
Yeah, that would be
just
fun.
yeah.
I'm, Scott and I had a little. Well, I didn't shoot actually. I was there. The It was kind of interesting. A couple of years ago, when I first took over Remington, I had a number of writers come out, which, as you know, we're going to do again to introduce a new product. But I had a number of writers come out. Your husband was one of them, and it really surprised me because I didn't know most of these guys, and I was out hunting when they arrived, and they were shocked. I mean, really shocked that the CEO of Remington actually was a hunter, which quite surprised me. I mean, why
That's
wouldn't the
great.
CEO of a
Right.
firearms company be a hunter? But apparently,
Absolutely.
there was a lot of them that are not.
Yeah, that's true.
So,
That's very true. But
so hopefully, we will get some trigger time.
that'd be wonderful. Well,
And
I really appreciate you having me on the podcast. This was fun. It was fun to talk to you, and it'll be fun to do again.
well, and we'll send you. Dave will send you information about when it's going to air, et cetera, et cetera.
Great,
Hopefully you'll listen. Because it was fun talking to you. I really enjoyed it.
great. Well, thanks so much again.
All right,
Appreciate
thanks,
it.
Diana.
All
Have a
right.
nice day. All right,
You
bye
too.
now.
Bye bye.